doctor.
Welcome back. Relentless, sleepless and painfully inconsolable. That was my and our experience of colic with our first child. We weren't alone. Around 1 in 5 children in South Africa suffer from the somewhat mysterious condition. Now, to be diagnosed with colic, the rule of threes has been suggested, that a baby must cry for more than 3 hours a day, more than 3 days a week for at least 3 weeks. But you know, that's just academic and almost unhelpful. So, Meg, academic definitions aside, how do you describe and define colic?
Well, the word colic is defined as being abdominal discomfort. So for years and years, we've thought that the baby has a sore tummy because they pull up their legs, they red in the face, they might burp, they might fart, and they just generally look like they're very uncomfortable.
Cramping, yeah.
They look like they're cramping. But the reality is that in recent years, we've started to realize that it actually has very little to do with what's going on in the abdomen and a whole lot more to do with what's going on in the brain. The reality is that the newborn baby has a very immature nervous system, and so they've come from this very calming womb world into the very busy world we live in, and they're trying to deal with all the sensory information. And so they become overstimulated literally by all of the cacophony of noise, touch, sound, movement, and so on in the environment. So it has more to do with overstimulation than anything else.
Wow, colic almost is a diagnosis by elimination, because there are other things that can cause babies to be upset and to cry and be kind of disgruntled. So what do we look for to exclude all other causes of potentially colic?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first thing I always say to parents is start with the womb world. So right at the beginning, before your baby even starts with colic, but especially if they've started with colic, reenact the womb world. So you want to create a space that is very, very calming. Make sure your baby has regular sleeps as well, because sleep lets us recharge and just get rid of all the overstimulation. So those are the first things. But if your baby's still crying and very colicky after that, then you start to have to rule out organic causes of crying. But usually, 9 times out of 10, they're not ill. They're absolutely fine. So, and colic, in fact, is defined as being in otherwise healthy babies. These babies are healthy. So then we start to look at other things like reflux, like allergies and intolerances, and all of those type of things. So then I would refer them onto a pediatrician to have a look at that, yeah.
We don't know what causes colic. We'd love to know, but we don't. I mean, there's theories about a mom's anxiety, about diet, about the quality of breast milk. What's your theory?
Yeah, I mean, my theory is that it's overstimulation. But like you say, there's actually no evidence in any direction at all. The only thing that we do know is that all of the medications that are handed out for colic, generally, you know, the type of medications that settle the tummies actually work as well as placebos, as sugar water. So in actual fact, that's the only thing we know 100% from the research. But from my perspective, it really is the fact that the baby's overstimulated, and there is more and more research that is leading towards that. The mom's anxiety, it's a difficult one, because when your baby's crying, you're anxious. And if somebody says to you, your baby's crying because you're anxious, you just get more anxious, because now you've got to stop being anxious.
It doesn't help to say relax.
Yeah.
I want to relax, I can't relax, you know.
So, you know, the baby anxiety, the mom anxiety story, I don't really like, because I think it's hard enough to be a mom without being told you mustn't be anxious when you are.
Now listen, we hear a baby in the background. That's little Alessandra, and Aliki's with us. I'm going to ask them to come in and talk about how we can actually deal with colic. We can't treat it, we can't make it go away, but we can manage those symptoms, if you like. So, Aliki, welcome. Hello, Alessandra. Hello. Not your first time in studio. And you've been as vocal as ever, hey?
Yes, she is. I told her to wait her turn, but...
No, wanted to get in there. I want to be on the set, Mom! Did you guys battle with colic, Aliki?
You know what? Initially, she did have stomach cramps, and I could see that she was extremely uncomfortable. So I obviously just wrote it down to colic, because that's like the general...
misconception.
Yeah, absolutely. So then... after about a month and a half or so, I started thinking, oh, like you get to know your baby a little bit more. And then I took her to the pediatrician. I said, look, could it be like her milk? You know, I mean, at the time I was thinking to myself, like, oh, what do I know? I'm a new mom one. You know, but you kind of get like a little feeling. So anyways, it turns out that it was her milk. And he changed her onto soya formula. And she's like, the second day, she was totally fine.
So let's talk about that, Meg, because that's one of the things that I'm sure is part of the regimen of tackling how do we deal with colic, how do we get through this unscathed. Yeah,
look, I mean, I definitely think it was amazing that you were so instinctive about it, that this was a classically good baby who was having these troubles. So you end up at the doctor, and you did it at about a month and a half, which is 6 weeks, which is when it would happen, the peak of the crying.
Yeah.
And what happens at that point is that Aliki done so much to try and solve it, and it was still there, that the doctor obviously said, let's have a look if it's organic or not. And so is she allergic to cow's milk? Does she have a cow's milk protein allergy? Is she lactose intolerant? And often it's just feeling your way in the dark and saying, well, let's see if a change makes a difference, which it did in her case. And that was so, it was a classic organic cause.
So grateful, I promise you.
And it just abated immediately.
Yeah, immediately. It was like, it never happened.
So it wasn't colic, which is great.
No,
but we are still going to use Alessandra as a little bit of a baby model to help us understand how to kind of deal with those symptoms that make not so. I mean, there's swaddling, there's all sorts of things you can do to help out. So do you want to take us through some of those steps?
Yeah, well, a couple of practical things. If you've got a baby who's very windy and very gassy because they've got an intolerance to the milk or something on an organic level, you are going to be very concerned about burping them. And that might have happened to you, that it was, I've got to get this burp up, because if I don't get this burp up, they're going to end up crying.
I used to feel frustrated, like, come on.
And you start to pursue it. I mean, I've had mum say to me, 40 minutes of burping and the burp still isn't up. But what happens then is we have this burping of the baby, and then feeding, and then burping and pacing. And what you can feel is happening is that there's more and more stimulation going in.
Yes.
And so I always say to mums, the 5-minute rule for burping. Even if you feel your baby's very gassy, burp them for 5 minutes and then let them be. The second thing is that even if your baby does have an organic cause for colic, you should probably look at something like settling down the world in terms of swaddling them and carrying them. And so I go back to the womb world and I say, swaddle your baby, because it creates a womb environment that's very similar to where they were in the last trimester of pregnancies. The next thing that I would do is I really would focus on sleep times, because we know that if we're overstimulated, and this goes for all of us, if we're overstimulated and overtired, we're that much more sensitive to things.
Yes.
So she would have been more sensitive to the burps and the winds and the irritability in her tummy if she was overtired.
Yes.
So very regular day sleeps become something that's very, very important in those first 3 months. And for a little one, you're talking about an hour of awake time. So literally, your baby's awake for an hour, and then they go back down again. So it's a very short period of time.
Yes.
And then as the final thing, I always say to mums in the early days, don't worry about spoiling your baby. Hold your baby. It's probably that they want close proximity, they want to be carried, and that and having a sling, for instance, or a baby carrier where your baby can be against you really enacts that womb world again, because your baby's with you, they can smell you, they can hear your heartbeat, and they get the pace of your body again. And that also settles them down. So don't worry about spoiling them.
It's
short-lived. Go for it.
That is good advice.
Absolutely.
I thought you were going to tell Aliki just to take a sleeping tablet. You know? Let her look after Alessandra.
It's like, if she's not going to keep quiet, I'll just take a pill.
Next, 1 in 5 moms are going to go through colic. And it is exhaustion, there's emotional exhaustion, and there's a risk of postpartum depression associated with that. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's always been said that postpartum depression is linked to sleep deprivation. And when you've got a very colicky baby, you're probably sleep deprived as well. Good chance of it. So knowing that link, I really, really do feel for mums, because you reach a point at which you say, I can't actually do this anymore. I was so successful before. I could run a business before. I had people responding to me in the business world. And now suddenly, this little thing is ruining my life. And you start to feel really, really at a loss for it. So a couple of things with postnatal depression. The important thing is to talk about it. I mean, moms actually don't realize just how many other moms are going through just what they are. And I mean, we have a busy Facebook page where the moms chat about this to each other, and I love the way they support each other, because a mom will come on and she'll say, I'm just feeling so desperate, I haven't had any sleep, and somebody will come on and say, I'm feeling exactly the same way. And so connecting, admitting, and just getting yourself a support structure, even if it's online, is important. And next important thing is getting yourself some sleep. And that might mean, I mean, you laugh about a sleeping pill, but it might mean having dad take the baby, granny come in, having an au pair, if that's what it means, over midday, so that you can actually just get yourself some sleep. Because sleep really is one of the biggest protective factors for mums against postnatal depression as well. So it's admitting it, getting a little bit of sleep, and then just knowing it'll pass.
Brilliant. Megs, as always, great practical advice. Thank you so much. Aliki, thanks for bringing Alessandra. Alessandra, thanks for having your mom here. And if you're going through colic, remember the most important thing to know and to keep in mind is this too shall pass.
I want to live the best life.